The crystal glass felt cool and heavy in my hand as I navigated the crowded terrace. "Another gin and tonic, girl, and make it quick," my mother-in-law, Beatrice, snapped without looking at me. She was holding court with a circle of her friends, their laughter sharp and brittle in the warm evening air. She waved a dismissive hand, her diamond rings catching the light from the grand chandeliers hanging over the marble floors. One of her friends leaned in and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "You're so generous, Beatrice, letting her help out. It must give her a sense of purpose." They all saw me as the charity case, the quiet, plain girl from a poor background who had somehow tricked their golden boy, my husband Liam, into marriage. In their eyes, I was a stain on their pristine family name, fit only to serve them drinks and clean up their messes. They believed I should be grateful for every scrap of attention they threw my way, even if that attention was coated in contempt. Tonight was their 40th wedding anniversary, a lavish affair designed to cement their status at the top of the city's social ladder, and they had assigned me my role, the unpaid help. They had no idea that the crystal glass in my hand, the roof over their heads, and the very ground this magnificent mansion was built on all belonged to me. Every perfectly manicured hedge, every shimmering pane of glass in the floor-to-ceiling windows, every bottle of vintage champagne being poured was mine. I had purchased this estate 6 months ago under a shell corporation, my secret victory after years of silent, relentless work. You might be wondering why I, the secret owner of this entire estate, would allow myself to be treated like a servant in my own home. Why I would bite my tongue as the woman who tormented me for years ordered me around like a dog. It's simple. To expose a family of snakes, you first have to let them believe they have you completely cornered. You let them reveal their true nature right before you burn their whole world to the ground. To understand how we got here, we have to go back 5 years. It started, as these things often do, with love. I met Liam at a small coffee shop where I used to work while putting myself through night school. He was charming, handsome, and seemed completely different from the wealthy, entitled men I sometimes saw come into the city. He didn't seem to care that I wore secondhand clothes or that my parents were gone, leaving me with nothing but debt and determination. He said he admired my resilience. He said I was the most genuine person he'd ever met. For the first year, I believed him. I fell for him completely and utterly. I thought we were building a life that was ours alone. The first crack appeared the day he took me to meet his parents, Beatrice and Robert. They lived in a house that was less of a home and more of a museum, filled with antique furniture and an oppressive silence. Beatrice looked me up and down, her smile as thin as a razor wire. The first question she asked me wasn't about my interests or my job, but about my family name. When I told her my parents were simple, working-class people who had passed away, her smile tightened. "Oh, I see," she said, as if I had just confessed to a crime. Throughout dinner, she fired a barrage of thinly veiled insults. "What was your father's profession? A mechanic, you say? How quaint. And you're studying business? It's so ambitious for a girl with your background." Every word was designed to remind me that I was an outsider, an unwelcome weed in her perfect garden. My hands were shaking under the table, but I kept my composure, answering each question politely. I looked to Liam, hoping he would step in, say something, defend me. He just gave a weak, apologetic smile and squeezed my hand under the table as if that was enough. Later, in the car, he said, "Mom's just a little old-fashioned. She's protective of me. She'll warm up to you." But I knew, with a sinking feeling in my stomach, that she would never warm up to me. Her heart was a block of ice, and she had already decided I would never be good enough for her son. Despite that awful dinner, I stayed. Liam promised things would get better. He swore his love for me was stronger than his mother's prejudice. And like a fool, I believed him. A year later, he proposed. The moment was perfect. Just the two of us on a quiet beach at sunset. For a little while, I forgot all about his family and allowed myself to dream of our future. That dream shattered the moment we announced our engagement. Beatrice immediately took control of everything. It was no longer our wedding. It was her son's wedding, a social event she was producing. My opinions were dismissed at every turn. The simple, intimate garden ceremony I wanted was scoffed at. Absolutely not, Beatrice declared. The family requires a proper church wedding at St. James Cathedral. My choice of dress was deemed inadequate for a woman marrying into this family. She and my future sister-in-law, Chloe, dragged me to couture boutiques, making snide remarks about my taste until I relented and chose a gown they approved of, one that felt like a costume. Chloe was a younger, sharper version of her mother. "Are you sure about that neckline, Alara?" She'd sneer. "It doesn't exactly scream high society." The final humiliation came a week before the ceremony. Beatrice and Robert sat me down in their study, a stack of papers on the polished mahogany desk between us. It was a prenuptial agreement. "It's just a formality, dear," Robert said, refusing to meet my eyes. "A way to protect the family's legacy." Beatrice was more direct. "We can't have any misunderstandings down the line. It's to ensure you're marrying Liam for the right reasons." The message was clear. They thought I was a gold digger. Liam stood by the window, silent. He wouldn't even look at me. They expected me to argue, to cry, to put up a fight. Instead, I picked up the pen and signed it without reading a single clause. A flicker of surprise crossed Beatrice's face. She couldn't know that my small tech startup, the one I ran from my tiny apartment, had just secured its second round of funding. She couldn't know that while they were trying to protect their legacy, I was quietly building an empire they couldn't possibly imagine. That prenup, their ultimate weapon against me, was the best gift they could have ever given me. It legally separated my future fortune from theirs. The wedding day felt less like a celebration of love and more like a business transaction where I was the asset being acquired. I walked down the aisle of St. James Cathedral, a puppet in a dress I didn't choose, to marry a man who had stood silently by while his family branded me a fortune hunter. I smiled for the cameras and danced the first dance, but a cold resolve was beginning to form in my heart. I had hoped for a partner, but it was becoming clear I was on my own. Married life was a continuation of the same Cold War. Beatrice and Chloe had a key to our apartment, a housewarming gift that was actually a license to invade my privacy whenever they pleased. They would show up unannounced, running a finger over a dusty shelf with a sigh of disappointment, or rearranging the furniture to their liking. "A home reflects the woman who keeps it," Beatrice would say, her eyes sweeping over my decor with disdain. "This is all very temporary looking." Liam would be at work, and when I'd tell him how their visits made me feel suffocated, he'd just sigh. "They're just trying to help, Alara. That's how they show they care." My career became their favorite punching bag. I told them I worked as a freelance project manager, a vague title that allowed me to hide the truth. That I was the CEO and founder of a rapidly growing software company, Innovate Dynamics. I worked from a small private office I rented downtown, but they imagined me tapping away on a laptop at the kitchen table. "You should quit that little computer hobby of yours," Beatrice once told me over brunch. "A woman of your new station should be focused on charity boards and hosting luncheons. I could get you a spot on my committee." I politely declined, which only cemented their view of me as ungrateful and socially inept. They had no idea that the little hobby was about to make me one of the wealthiest women in the state. Their blindness was my greatest asset. I let them underestimate me. I let them think I was weak and insignificant. I realized that arguing was pointless. You can't reason with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Their cruelty wasn't a flaw, it was a feature. And I decided then and there that I would no longer try to win their approval. I would win something far more valuable: my freedom. The years passed in a blur of quiet endurance. I perfected the art of being invisible in my own life. I smiled politely at family dinners while they ignored me. I nodded while Beatrice lectured me on my inadequacies, and I watched Liam drift further away, becoming more his mother's son than my husband. All the while, my company was exploding. I had moved from a small rented office to owning an entire floor of a downtown skyscraper. I had a team of over 100 employees. My net worth grew into the tens of millions, then hundreds of millions. They saw me in my simple jeans and sweaters and saw poverty. I saw a disguise that was working perfectly. The perfect opportunity arrived in the form of an engraved invitation. Beatrice and Robert were planning a party for their 40th wedding anniversary. This wasn't just a party, it was a coronation, a way to reassert their dominance in their social circle. Beatrice complained for weeks that no venue was good enough. "The ballroom at the Astoria is so dated," she lamented, "and the country club is dreadfully common these days." She wanted perfection, a place that would make everyone gasp. This was the moment I had been preparing for. 6 months prior, I had purchased the old Blackwood Manor, a sprawling, breathtaking estate on 100 acres of private woodland overlooking the city. I had spent a fortune renovating it, restoring it to a level of luxury that hadn't been seen in a century. I named it Serenity Crest Estate and kept my ownership hidden behind layers of corporate paperwork. One evening, as Beatrice complained about her venue search, I had my sister-in-law, Chloe, do my work for me. I had my marketing team run a single, targeted social media ad. Knowing Chloe's obsession with luxury lifestyle influencers would put it right on her phone. Right on cue, she gasped, "Mother, look! This place, Serenity Crest Estate. It's brand new. Oh, it's stunning. But I'm sure it's impossible to book." I had my estate manager call Beatrice the very next day, explaining that a high-profile client had a sudden cancellation and the estate was available on their anniversary weekend. To sweeten the deal, we offered it for a fraction of the actual cost, a promotional rate to generate buzz. Beatrice jumped at it, giddy with her good fortune. She boasted for days about her incredible luck and negotiating prowess. The trap was set. All they had to do was walk into it. The day of the party was a masterpiece of stagecraft. The sun shone in a cloudless sky, the gardens were in full, fragrant bloom, and the mansion gleamed as if it were carved from ivory and gold. My staff, all of whom were handsomely paid and had signed ironclad non-disclosure agreements, performed their duties flawlessly. The valet service was seamless. The champagne was perfectly chilled, and the string quartet played softly on the lawn. Beatrice and Robert stood at the grand entrance, greeting their guests, their faces flushed with pride. They looked like the king and queen of a world they believed they owned. I arrived with Liam an hour into the event, dressed in a simple but elegant navy blue dress. I wanted to give them one last chance. A chance to treat me like a daughter, like family, on their most important night. That hope was extinguished almost immediately. Beatrice pulled me aside, her eyes scanning my dress with disapproval. "Alara," she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. You know, this is a very high-profile event. The mayor is here. We need everything to be perfect. She paused for dramatic effect. And since you never seem comfortable mingling, I thought you could contribute in a more practical way. The caterers are a little short-staffed. I just stared at her, waiting. Chloe sidled up next to her, a venomous smile on her face. It's a great idea, Mom. That way she doesn't have to make awkward small talk. Liam, standing nearby, finally spoke up, his voice weak. Mom, stop it. She's my wife, not the help. Beatrice waved a dismissive hand at him. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Liam. She understands. It's better to be useful than to be a wallflower. You're happy to pitch in, aren't you, dear? All three of them looked at me, expecting me to shrink, to protest, to crumble. I met Beatrice's gaze and gave her a small, serene smile. Of course, Beatrice, I said, my voice steady. Anything to make your night perfect. A triumphant smirk spread across her face. She had finally put me in my proper place. She pointed me toward the service entrance where a black apron was waiting for me. As I tied it around my waist, I felt a strange sense of peace. The final piece of evidence was now in place. I picked up a tray of champagne flutes and walked onto the terrace, re-entering the party not as a guest, but as the catalyst for their destruction. For the next hour, I played my part. I carried trays, cleared empty glasses, and smiled vacantly when guests gave me orders. I watched Beatrice and Chloe preen and glide through the party, soaking in the adoration. I saw Liam mingling, laughing with old friends, occasionally glancing my way with a pained expression before quickly looking away. He was a coward, paralyzed by his desire for a quiet life. He chose comfort over character, and that was a choice he would have to live with. Finally, the moment came. The string quartet quieted, and Robert tapped a spoon against a glass, calling for everyone's attention. He and Beatrice stood on the raised dais, bathed in the warm glow of the lights, a portrait of success and privilege. Friends, family, Robert began, his voice booming. Thank you all for being here to celebrate 40 years of marriage with my beautiful Beatrice. He went on for a few minutes, thanking guests and telling a tired old joke. Then he handed the microphone to his wife. Beatrice basked in the applause. Thank you, darling, she purred. Looking out at all your faces in this breathtaking setting, my heart is just so full. We have built a beautiful life, a wonderful family. Her eyes scanned the crowd, and then, with theatrical pity, they landed on me as I stood near the service station, holding an empty tray. She smiled a cruel, knowing smile. And we've learned that a strong family is a generous one. It's about opening your heart and your home, even to those who come from nothing at all. It teaches you humility and the importance of charity. A few of her friends tittered knowingly. That was my cue. I set the tray down on a table, untied the black apron, and let it fall to the floor. I walked calmly and deliberately from the shadows of the terrace toward the light of the dais. The crowd parted slightly, confused murmurs rippling through the air. Beatrice's smile faltered as I approached. Before she or Robert could say a word, I reached her side and gently took the microphone from her stunned hand. I turned to the silent, watching crowd, raised the microphone to my lips, and spoke in a clear, calm voice. Thank you, Beatrice. I'd also like to thank all of you for coming. It means so much that you could all be here to celebrate this special occasion. In my home. A wave of confused gasps rippled through the guests. On the dais, Robert's face went slack with confusion, and Chloe looked as if she'd been slapped. Beatrice, however, recovered quickly, forcing a high-pitched, brittle laugh. "Oh, Alara, you silly girl," she trilled, reaching for the microphone. "Liam, darling, I think your wife has had a little too much to drink. Someone get her a water." She tried to dismiss me, to paint me as a hysterical woman making a scene. I held the microphone firmly and took a step away from her. "I'm perfectly sober, Beatrice," I said, my voice echoing across the silent terrace. "I've been far too busy serving your guests to drink anything. But you're right about one thing. Liam is my husband, which makes me your daughter-in-law, not your servant." I let that hang in the air for a moment before continuing. "And this is my house. I bought it on February the 12th of this year through my company." "Her company?" Chloe sneered, finding her voice. "You mean that little blog you write on your laptop? Don't be ridiculous." "She's right," I said, turning to Chloe. "It's not ridiculous at all." I scanned the crowd, and my eyes met those of Mr. Davies, my chief legal counsel, who was dressed impeccably as a guest. On cue, he stepped forward and handed me a leather folio. I opened it and pulled out a single, crisp document. "This is the deed to the 112-acre property known as Serenity Crest Estate. As you can see, the owner is listed as a holding company, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of my company, Innovate Dynamics." I held up the document. "And as you can see right here, the sole director of that company is me, Alara Vance." A low murmur went through the crowd. I turned my attention back to Beatrice, whose face had gone from smug to a pale, blotchy white. "Innovate Dynamics? You called it my little computer hobby. You told me I should quit so I could learn to host luncheons. Well, I'm hosting one now, this one, and you have no idea how much it's costing you." Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was, for the first time since I'd met her, utterly speechless. "Liar!" Beatrice finally shrieked, her voice cracking. The mask of the elegant socialite was gone, replaced by a face contorted with pure rage. "You're a thief! You schemed and you stole this. You tricked my son. You manipulated us. You have nothing. You are nothing." Her finger was pointed at me, trembling. The guests shrank back, horrified by the raw ugliness of her outburst. I looked at her, my expression unmoving. "I didn't steal anything, Beatrice. I earned it. I built my company from nothing while you were critiquing the brand of coffee I served you. And as for being a liar," I said, pulling my phone from a hidden pocket in my dress, "I've learned it's always wise to keep records, especially when dealing with people who have a habit of rewriting history." With a few taps, I connected my phone to the high-end sound system of the venue. Her own voice, sharp and condescending, suddenly filled the night air. "She's a charity case, Liam. A pretty face with an empty bank account. You need to get her to sign that prenup, or I'll cut you off completely." A collective gasp went through the crowd. I saw Liam flinch as if he'd been struck. Before anyone could recover, the next clip played. It was Chloe's voice, dripping with malice. "Honestly, Mom, I don't know what he sees in her. She has no style, no connections. She's dragging our family name through the mud." I let the silence hang for a moment, then played the final recording, the one I had made less than 2 hours ago. "It's better to be useful than to be a wallflower. You're happy to pitch in, aren't you, dear?" The public humiliation was absolute. The guests, including the mayor, were staring at Beatrice and Chloe with open disgust. They were not just cruel, they were common. Their carefully constructed image was shattered. As they stood there, frozen in shame, I gave another nod. My event manager, a crisp professional in a black suit, stepped forward and presented Beatrice with a thick, itemized invoice. "You were so proud of the bargain you got for this party," I announced, my voice cutting through the silence. "The real price wasn't on the contract. It was my dignity. But since we're settling all debts tonight, let's settle this one too. That is the actual non-discounted bill for tonight's festivities. The total is $254,000. It's due in 30 days. Beatrice stared at the invoice as if it were a venomous snake, her hand trembling. Robert looked like he might collapse. But it was Liam who finally moved. He stumbled forward, his face pale and etched with a desperate, dawning horror. He finally saw the entirety of the abyss that had been living under his nose for 5 years. "Illara," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me about your company? Why did you let them do this?" I looked at my husband, soon to be my ex-husband, and felt nothing but a profound, empty pity. "Let them?" I asked, my voice devoid of heat. "I didn't let them, Liam. You did. I told you 1,000 times how they made me feel. I begged you to see the cruelty behind their words, and every single time, you told me I was being too sensitive. You told me to be patient. You asked me to make myself smaller and smaller to fit into the tiny, suffocating box your mother built for me. You didn't fail to see the truth, Liam. You actively chose to look away because my pain was less important than your comfort." Tears were streaming down his face now. "Please," he begged, reaching for my hand. "We can fix this. I love you." I pulled my hand back. "No, we can't. Love doesn't ask someone to endure abuse. It doesn't stand by silently during public humiliation." I looked him directly in the eye, delivering the final, quiet blow. "The prenup your family insisted on was very thorough. It protects all assets acquired before and during the marriage. It protects everything I built. My lawyer filed the divorce papers this afternoon on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. You'll be served on Monday morning." His face crumpled. My gaze shifted past him to the discreetly placed security guards I had hired for the evening. I gave a slight nod. "My guests are leaving," I announced, my voice carrying in the still night air. "Please escort Robert, Beatrice, Chloe, and Liam from my property immediately." There were no more screams, no more arguments, just the pathetic, shuffling sound of their defeat as they were led away past their former friends who refused to meet their eyes. The guests melted away quickly after that, leaving me alone on the vast terrace. The party was over. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence, looking at the glittering city lights below. There was no elation, no thrill of victory. There was only a deep, quiet, and profound peace. The world they had tried to crush me with was gone. In its place was my world, built by my own 2 hands. And in it, for the first time in a very long time, I was finally free.